Thank you, that was a gift. So, hi. This month our services have focused on the theme sustainable. And we've heard a lot about this theme from this pulpit, with takes from a number of different angles. But I think it's especially and poetically appropriate that this week our last service on this theme is brought to you by this group of worship associates: Chris, Dan, August, Robin, and me. We, like you, are church members who are here in service to the values, the principles, the mission, and the vision of this religious community. Now, we could probably spend several years on services on the theme, what is the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene? And if you got any three of us together, we'd have 5 answers. But the simple answer I'll use for the purposes of this is that we are us. We are a congregation of people here in this room, and those who are absent but here in our hearts, our thoughts, and our memories. We are a congregation of people who come together week after week and year after year to share our love, our stories, our generosity, and our compassion. And by doing that, by coming together to share, this congregation is what sustains this church. And this church is what sustains us. As I was writing this reflection, I started trying to figure out how long I've been part of this community. And I had an experience that I think can best be summed up by the phrase wibbly wobbly timey wimey. I was frankly shocked to realize that my family and I first came to services here a little less than 5 years ago. And although we've been coming for half a decade, I still feel in many ways like we are very new to this community. When we hear about the history and memories of the friends we've made here who arrived in this place before we did, memories of different ministers, a different building, different traditions, I feel in a deep way that I have become a part of something that has been sustained and something that is worth sustaining. And on the other side of that feeling of newness, I also feel as though I have been here forever. I have a hard time thinking about a time that this church wasn't woven into the fabric of my life. For me, arriving in this congregation was also a way to sustain myself at a moment when I was thirsty for spiritual sustenance. Arriving here, I was at an inflection point in my life. I had started recently a new job. I was working with abused seniors and people with disabilities. And in my work days, I came into regular daily contact with people who were experiencing a deep and lasting trauma. I was often in a position to bear witness, but not to help. To live alongside trauma day after day is a certain special kind of exhausting, not only of the mind and often the body, but also the spirit and even, dare I say it, the soul. Coming to sit in community with all of you each Sunday, to sing together and think together and feel the love that is this church encircle us together, has sustained me through many weeks. I know that I'm not alone in coming here to be sustained, and I have a different job now, still working with people in trauma, and I still rely on this church to center and restore myself. Sometimes, especially when I'm feeling low or spread thin, I need to be reminded that I need to be sustained. I need to be reminded sometimes even that I am worth sustaining. I don't think I'm alone in this experience. If you'll indulge me a metaphor, I asked Suzanne this morning if she'd be willing to help me out with this. There are weeks and sometimes months when all I'm able to manage is to carry on at my own bare minimum. Now Suzanne, whose gift of music sustains us week after week, she's going to help me by playing a reprise of the piece she shared with us during the gathering music, the piece Cascada. But this time she's going to play it without use of the sustain pedal. Thank you. And can you remind us what that piece sounds like when you play it as written? When the notes are sustained, when they're allowed to ring out and to blend and connect and to vibrate, they fill this room. When the notes are not sustained, when they're muted and fade away as soon as they've been played, they still exist. We can hear them, they have some beauty, but they're not able to thrive. Without anything to sustain it, the music is less than its full potential, and while we can hear it, perhaps it doesn't touch us in quite the same way. When it's been an especially hard time in my life, when I'm feeling low and I come here as a quieter, unsustained version of myself, and sometimes I don't even realize how much spiritual sustenance I need until I'm sitting in these rows and I hear some words or some music that begin to bring me back. And I have come to rely on this place for that sustenance. This church can exist without me. It can probably exist without each of you as individuals. But without us, it cannot thrive. When we are not here to sustain the work of this church, whether that is the work of worship, of outreach to the community, our small group ministries, of making coffee, bringing snacks, talking and loving each other during the social hour, spirit jam, groundskeeping, leaving $1 in the offering basket, making a pledge for ongoing financial support, or leaving $1 in the offering basket in addition to your pledge of ongoing support, or any of the other ways in which the members of this community, and by members of this community, I mean everyone, whether this is your first week here or your 500th, when we, the community who support this essential place, are sustained, we in turn sustain. But okay, a few weeks ago, our ministerial intern, Sarah Scotchko, gave a really lovely sermon on the theme of sustainability that was, in part, an encouragement for us to find peace with being good enough by doing what we can and letting go of the fret that we aren't doing everything. And I related to that sermon a lot. I'm one of those people who says yes to things, even when I probably shouldn't. And in fact, writing this reflection was an exercise for me in that very thing. This has been a month full of commitments. Nearly every evening, one of those times in which the things that I do, that I enjoy and I do to sustain myself have taken up so much of me that I've begun to feel overwhelmed and stressed out. I've been feeling drained and struggled to find time to sit down and write this and felt guilty that I didn't give it more of my time. I'm not saying that by way of an apology or a disclaimer, but rather to underscore that in light of what I'm saying here about the mutually sustaining relationship between the church and the people who are the church, it's also important to remember that enough really is enough, and that sometimes holding the sustain pedal for too long is too much. When Suzanne plays, she lifts her foot off the pedal after each phrase of music to make room for the notes of the next phrase. If she played that piece of music with the sustain pedal held down throughout, the notes would ring out so long and cover each other so much it would make the music discordant, chaotic, and overwhelming. I'm not going to ask you to do that because I think it would be hard to listen to. But we can imagine it, right? Yeah. So like everything good, there's a balance here, an art of knowing when to sustain and when not to, and when knowing that sustaining is sometimes too much, and when knowing that sometimes it's not enough. I've heard people talk, especially in terms of environmental issues, about the insufficiency of sustainability. This isn't my idea. There are books and articles that have made this point, and I think it's a good one. That sustainability is too low a bar when we consider the natural environment that keeps us alive and provides us opportunities to find joy and reverence. When I think of what I want out of my relationship with the planet, the best descriptions I can come up with are wild, passionate, ecstatic, reverent, joyful love. The same sorts of words I think of to describe how I feel about my wife. The same sorts of words I think of when I think of what I want from my relationship with this church. If a faraway relative called me up and asked, "How's your marriage going?" and the answer I could come up with was, "Well, it's sustainable." Well, that would hardly be a glowing endorsement. When thinking then of how we relate to our world, do we want to aim for only sustainability or do we want to thrive? For me, I love the idea that the goal of protecting the environment is about something more than sustainability, that it is about having a world in which we are wild, passionately, ecstatically, reverently, and joyfully in love. And the same is true for this church. If my relationship to the church is merely one of sustaining, one in which my relationship is about a transaction of my time, talent, and treasure in exchange for an experience of spiritual renewal and growth, well, there may be times that that's okay. There may be times that it's enough. There may be times that I come here drained and leave renewed, and there may be times when I come here full and give freely. There will be times when I come here drained and give freely, and there will be times that I come full and leave thriving. And that's what I want to strive for in terms of my relationship with this community. What I want, what I suspect many of us want, is a community that transcends these transactional ideas of give and take and becomes something of a shared experience of unconditional, passionate, ecstatic, reverent, joyful love. What I hope is that we together are building a community that does more than sustains us, a community that grows and thrives with us, that encourages us and supports us to grow and thrive with it. When I first showed up here 5 years ago, I didn't know much about the community I was joining. I knew that I needed something to sustain me, a place to find a kind of weekly restoration, a place to make friends, a place for my kids to call home. I found all of that in this community and more. And I hope each of you also has and does, and will continue to be sustained by your relationship to this place, and to be more than sustained, to grow and to thrive here as we all continue to share this part of our religious lives together. Blessed be. Amen. And whatever you prefer. Now,